Dr. Karim Sharara, thank you very much for being my guest again on Syriana Analysis. Actually, I don't treat you as a guest. You're like a friend of Syriana Analysis for a long time. And we want to focus today on Hossein Amir-Abdollahian. I'm having a hard time in pronouncing his surname. I
It's an
mean,
unusually long name for
yes, it is.
for what we use it to
It is a long name. And he has become the new foreign minister of Iran. And Iran is a regional country, and it's a very important country in the region. So we need to address his appointment. Now, apart from the ideological differences between him and the former foreign minister, Javad Zarif, as the latter was more called a moderate according to the media, and Amir-Abdollahian is considered more a conservative radical also according to the media. What are the main differences in approach between them? Especially, I want to focus on two things: the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, and the Syrian war.
Okay. Well, first of all, the West is always fond of these labels, him being a radical and Zarif being a moderate, because one studied in the US and can supposedly speak with Western interlocutors. He can speak with the West, he can address the West, he can speak English, so he must be a moderate. And then on the other hand, you have this person who has studied in Iran and who gave the West a hard time with his approach, so he must be a radical. Why? Because he's affiliated with people they don't like in Iran. This in itself is funny, first of all. Second of all, I don't think they have ideological differences. They do have the same principles, but it's just as you said, they have differences in terms of how they approach things within the confines of diplomacy in Iran. So they do have these differences. They may be subtle nuances, and they may be things as huge as to concern, for example, how they view Iranian diplomacy should be, and how they tackle Iranian diplomacy, how they tackle the West. These, of course, are very important. As for the JCPOA, Dr. Abdollahian has already stated that the JCPOA is not a priority for Iran. And President Raisi himself has already said that the priority in terms of foreign affairs in Iran, foreign policy in Iran, is Iran's relationship with its neighbors. So this is how we should see the importance of Amir-Abdollahian's appointment, and it's that he used to be the deputy foreign minister for Arab and African affairs. So he knows the region, he knows the people of the region, he knows the subtle nuances and cultural differences between.
But that's a considerable change. That's a considerable change from his predecessor, right? Like Javad Zarif, he negotiated the nuclear deal, and he weighed in order for the nuclear deal to be recontinued again after Trump's, let's say, bold step or to withdraw from this deal. Now, Amir-Abdollahian, he is in power again, and we are seeing a different tone, at least in regards to the JCPOA.
Look, Zarif was the perfect person to speak with the West. He, like I said, he knew how to speak with the West, because not only did he study with the West, not only does he speak perfect English, at least that's how the West views him. He was the perfect person to negotiate such a deal. At least, let's say, to arrive to a deal with the West, not necessarily the perfect person to negotiate the deal. But now the period we're in, as far as Raisi is concerned, as far as how he understands the period, necessitates someone who knows how to talk with Iran's neighbors. You have the two major regional powers, Iran and Saudi Arabia, that haven't spoken in a few that have diplomatic issues. They have zero economic partnership. And these issues need to be addressed, as does Iran's relationship with the GCC countries. This should also be addressed. And this is where Dr. Amir-Abdollahian's strengths flourish. He is the person to speak with these countries, but we're still in the beginning now. So I do think it's too soon to tell.
But you're saying now, you're saying he will prioritize the region. He will talk to his neighbors.
Yes,
and
yes.
This is
Economic partnership. This is the period now. This is the era. Economic partnership, economic integration, which is what we said the last time.
That's very, very promising, at least theoretically, because for me is when the tensions are decreased between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the tensions in the theoretically in the entire region, the tensions in the entire region could be also decreased. Both are regional powers. We know they're each has its own interest, but at the end, it's pretty obvious, at least in the past 40 years, that no side can cancel the other side, right? Like both countries are strong regional countries here. But you mentioned the region, and Amir-Abdollahian he attended the conference Iraq and its neighbors. And he flew right after the conference for a meeting with President Bashar Assad. Now, I have two questions here. A, why Iraq in the first hand didn't send a formal invitation to Syria? I mean, who pressured Baghdad? And B, the Iraqi president yesterday said, I watched his interview or the debate with a journalist. He said that despite the absence of Syria, but we should rest assured that Damascus was in Baghdad. He means in an indirect way. Now, has Amir-Abdollahian represented Syria in any way in the conference, knowing that he met Assad just like a few hours after the conference?
Okay. Look, as for the second part, I think that was just just for media consumption, as far as I'm concerned, because as far as the reality goes, and as far as Iran understands things, or as as far as the way Iran conducts itself in the region, no one can replace Syria. No one can speak for Syria unless Syria itself says that this person speaks for me. But Amir-Abdollahian would never presume himself to speak for Syria because, look, I think this story speaks for itself. He related the story, I think, in Iranian media himself and in Tehran University. And this goes back to the year 2007, when the Americans and Iranians sat together on one table, and it was decided that they would negotiate how things would go in Iraq, because tensions were still increasing at the time. So there was a need for a certain measure of diplomacy and seeing how things would go in Iraq. So, and Amir-Abdollahian says this. He says that, first of all, when the Americans wanted to establish the meetings, they were pushing for, they themselves being the setters of the agenda. They were going to draw the agenda themselves, and we were supposed to acquiesce to this agenda and discuss whatever they wanted to discuss. We refused this. And second of all, the Americans, he said, and this is very important, he says that Ayatollah Khamenei, before we went to the talks, invited us over, and he gave us a few directions, but he said, and he stressed this point a lot. He said that in the future, after a few rounds, or perhaps even after the first session, the Americans will ask you to conduct the talks just between you and them, bilateral talks, without Iraq being present. So Iraq must be present at the negotiations. And sure enough, after the first or second sessions, the Americans approached the Iranian committee, the Iranian delegation, and they asked them to hold bilateral talks. And it's not important that whether Iraq is there or not, even though the talks were conducted in Baghdad, inside of Iraq, it's not important that Iraq is there.
Yes.
We're the agenda setters, we're the important ones. And the Iranian delegation refused this. Iran, this is the way Iran conducts itself in the region. It doesn't speak for anyone. It doesn't speak for the peoples of the region. It cooperates with the people of the region. It's not the agenda setter. It's the
Facilitates.
it facilitates the setting of a cooperative agenda. This is how Iran has always conducted itself.
I want to mention here I want to just weigh in here just also to mention an example. Like, of course, Iran, since its intervention in Syria, Tehran was formally invited, right?
Exactly.
So its presence
even in Iraq,
and so its presence is legal according to the international law and according to the Syrian constitution. But regardless, Iran also has its own small particular interest in Syria, and they were proposing things, giving suggestions, proposals to the Syrian government, but never during the war on Syria, Iran dictated anything on Syria. And it's not only because Iran is not in a position of dictating anything on Syria, but also the approach of Iran is different from other countries. For example, Saudi Arabia dictates what its allies in Lebanon should do. And we can all see, because we also follow the Lebanese media, and we see how the people who are affiliated with Saudi Arabia are like, even though what Saudi Arabia is dictating is against their own interests, it's against their electoral interests, it's against their economic interests, but still they stay in the wagon of Saudi Arabia. But when it comes to Iran,
I think this is important. Iran views its cooperation with the peoples of the region as something that is binding, because it's going to have to live with these people for hundreds and thousands of years.
Yes.
So it needs to build trust with the people of the region and not dictate. Whenever you dictate something to another government, you're officially imposing your interests on this other government, first of all, and second of all, you're going to compound these dictates, and you're going to end up losing whatever face you have left in that country. So what Iran works with is mutual interest and not its own interest. And of course, its mutual interest with Syria is to work on whatever benefits Syria within Syria.
Yes. So Iran was, for example,
the,
proposing a few things for Syria, such as constitutional reforms or even accepting certain so-called opposition figures, and Syrians refused Iran's proposals. And this didn't win, or let's say, the relations between Syria and Iran didn't become less of an important or less of an alliance between them, because Iran at the end has its own perception of how the situation could be resolved, but the Syrians have their own perception how things could be resolved. And at the end of the day, it's Syrians who decide how things should be resolved in Syria, and the Iranians are accepting that fact in Syria.
Look, as for the first part of your question, I think it's very telling that he went to Syria after Iraq, because yes, although it's very important that Iran cooperate with the peoples of the region, but of course, its main interest lies in resistance and driving away foreign hegemony. And so Iran has immediate interests with the countries of the axis of resistance, which are Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Yemen, so far at least.
Yeah, but who pressured on Iraq particularly? Can you specify who pressured on Iraq? Because the president of Iraq talks very positively about Syria during the conference, but then the foreign ministry of Iraq issued a statement 2 weeks ago saying, no, we didn't send any invitation to Syria, and it's pretty obvious that there is a third party, there's an elephant in the room that we are not really seeing who that elephant is, who blocked Syria's attendance, right?
Look, as for the foreign ministry statement, it was because I think it was pressured into releasing the statement by the fact that the PMF delegation that went to Syria invited Syria into taking part in the conference, without any prior coordination with the foreign affairs ministry. So I think this is related to the dynamics within Iraq.
But I didn't like that.
But
I mean,
as for
why would the popular the P how do we what's
the PMF, the PMF or the PME?
PMF, yeah, the PMF would send an invitation. They're not in position to send formal invitations, right?
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. There apparently the tensions between the PMF and the foreign ministry got into so much of a scuffle over this that they wanted to embarrass the foreign ministry. At least that's how I understand things. Maybe there's another layer to things that hasn't come up so far, or that hasn't been shown in the media so far. But this is what we know so far. As for who pressured Iraq into doing all of this, look, the conference wasn't just about showing Iraq as a rising diplomatic power in the region. It also has an economic side to it, because France was there, and as you and I know, anything France does in terms of its foreign ministry is just to procure economic contracts and to develop its economic partnerships. Its foreign affairs ministry is actually its foreign economic ministry, so to speak. So France's position is also to increase its influence in Iraq and to procure added contracts for Iraq. And the presence of Syria might somewhat interfere with Iraq's interests in this regard. And second of all, although the UAE was present, the UAE isn't. I don't think the UAE, especially with what's been going on since May, with the UAE asking for Syria's return to the Arab League, I don't think the UAE is against Syria's presence, but the Saudis might be contrary to that presence, just out of spite, if nothing else.
Actually, the UAE and Jordan are also putting, I don't want to say pressure, because
they've been positive.
Yeah, they can't really put big pressure, but they were talking with the Americans because they want complete restoration of ties with Syria and to deal with Syria on economic level. Let's remember now the battle for Daraa is happening right now, and this won't happen unless Jordan also wants to clean all the southern part of Syria from these radical elements, because Syria wants to deal with Jordan.
And Jordan has a lot to gain from this.
Yes, on trade level.
Has a lot to gain from this.
And these terrorists are coming on the highway, and they're blocking every week the highway between Damascus and Jordan. So these countries
exactly
are playing...
just as soon as economic ties were being restored, the highway was blocked, and so Jordan was forced to close the border crossing.
Yeah,
this of course.
Karim,
go ahead.
One point is also here the Turkish. I mean, the Turkish agenda in the region, in my opinion, of course, 180% contradicts the Syrian interests, but there are some commonalities between Turkey, or let's say some common interests between Turkey and Iran. I mean, especially after the sanctions on Iran, and Iran needs Turkey, and Turkey is benefiting from this on financial level. But do you think that Amir-Abdollahian would have a different approach with Turkey, especially that Iran has an interest now to convince, if I want to use the diplomatic terms, Turkey to leave the northern Syria as soon as possible?
As far as Iran goes, especially in Syria, I think the military situation on the ground dictates how diplomacy is going to take place, or what diplomatic initiative it's going to take in order to resolve whatever situation is on the ground. So yes, the military and the foreign service are both in cooperation in order to arrive to certain goals. So I don't think that Iran can pressure Turkey to do anything about the north, to leave the north, because Turkey has a lot to gain from this, more than anything Iran can offer. However, the only thing that can change things is the military situation. Syria succeeds in driving Turkey out of the north, then this is a fait accompli. They have to deal with this on the ground. I don't think this issue is going to be resolved diplomatically.
Yeah,
Look,
when Syria tried to open the M4 highway between Homs, Hama, and Aleppo, Iran weighed in back then. And even though Turkey was directly also intervened, and let's remember also the Hezbollah was present in Aleppo, and they were in direct like confrontation with Turkey when in Aleppo. The proxies of Turkey and the Turkish forces were present with the proxies, right, in Aleppo and in Idlib.
Look, the military situation is more complex than one might imagine, especially in these areas, because, as you said, there was a bit of confrontation, even between, as far as I mean, even between Syrian forces and Turkish forces. Yes. It was limited, but it did happen. And of course, this caused a bit of tension between Iran and Turkey, but not to the point of causing tensions in diplomatic or causing very significant diplomatic tensions. Yes, they're using whatever clout they have in order to pressure Turkey into conceding to Syria, because Iran's interests lie with Syrian interests. This is something that's been shown over the past few years. But I will always be of the opinion that in Syria, the military situation is going to dictate what happens diplomatically. And there's something that's very interesting about Amir-Abdollahian that also runs in contrast to how Zarif ran things. And it's that he used to have a very close relationship with Marta Qasem Soleimani. And not only did they have a close relationship, but they also coordinated with one another in terms, back when he used to be deputy foreign minister and for Arab and African relations, they used to coordinate with one another. And this, I think, helped the diplomatic process in Iran and helped the military process in Iran's presence in Syria. So he does subscribe to the same ideology. In fact, I think he stated this himself. He became such a major fan of Qasem Soleimani because of how he used to run things in Syria. He subscribes to that same ideology. So this is why I'm saying that he believes in the power or in the importance of the military facts on the ground.
So the military power on the ground could give more power to diplomacy. But last we spoke, Karim, and this is my last question, we addressed the China-Iran Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which you mentioned. Some hardcore figures in Tehran weren't really happy about it, right? Is Amir-Abdollahian expected to modify the deal, or such decisions aren't simply in his hands, but rather in the hands of the supreme leader?
When I said hardcore, I didn't mean principalists. I meant the other way around. Those against China's rise in the region. Those people affiliated with either economic interests with the West, those that have economic interests with the West, or those that are more pro-West than others. Those are the hardcore figures I was referring to. But as far as Amir-Abdollahian goes and how he's going to tackle this deal, first of all, a lot of the aspects of this deal weren't and still aren't known to the public. The only related officials and high-level officials know what was really signed between Iran and China. The full extent of the deal is still not known to many people. Second of all, this deal is binding. It's not as if Iran is going to back out of anything it signed with China, but they may agree with China on ushering in some differences in terms of tactics, especially with relation to the recent developments in Afghanistan, because the Taliban, so far at least, it seems that they're going to cooperate with China, and it seems that they're going to cooperate with their neighbors in the region. How far the Americans will allow this is still not known. But at least at least if they can secure some interests in Afghanistan.
It seems Karim Sharara left us, but we were able to catch him at least in the past 30 or 40 minutes. He already mentioned that his electricity might go off at any moment. This is the situation, unfortunately, underground, whether in Syria or in Lebanon. So at least we were able to, yes, he's back. I was telling the audience that Karim told me the electricity might go off at any moment, but we were happy that we at least we were able to catch you for in the last 30 to 40 minutes.
The electricity is out. The electricity is out. But this is one of the perks of being in Lebanon. Thank you so much.
I was telling the audience that this is the situation in Syria and Lebanon. So at least we were able to tackle and address most of the important issues with you. I'm not gonna let you stay further because you will waste also your 4G package.
And it's expensive in Lebanon.
And it's expensive in Lebanon. Dr. Karim Sharara, it was a really pleasure talking to you about these issues. Your insights are very important for my audience on Syriana analysis. There are things that I cannot really address, so you're always welcomed. It's your channel as well on Syriana analysis. And guys, I'm doing similar videos and interviews, and I'm posting them both on YouTube and Rockfin. You can find all the links in the description below. And if you want to support Syriana analysis, you can buy me a coffee also through Patreon. You can become a patron. All the links, as I mentioned, in the description below, and see you next time.